Hello beautiful ones. Welcome to my channel English with LCS. So I know it has been a long time I put some video on this channel. Today I came up with one of the most important session in HSA or any competitive exams, that is Aristotle. So today we are going to discuss in detail Aristotle's Poetics. So Aristotle, who lived from 384 BC to 322 BC, was a very famous philosopher of Greek. So during his time, his philosophies or his critical treatises were considered to be one of the greatest thing in the history of criticism. One of the very famous works was Poetics, and the second was Rhetoric. So today we are going to study in detail Aristotle's Poetics. Aristotle's Poetics was a critical treatise which is having 50 pages containing 26 small chapters. So the book was actually believed to be a summary of all the lectures that he delivered to his students or pupils. So this was considered to be a complete picture or a complete analysis of tragedy, poetry and various forms of literary works. And in this Poetics, he was talking about tragedy, he was talking about comedy, epic and also poetry. And he also makes a comparison between poetry and history. That means poets and historians. So the point that you have to remember was that Poetics was a critical treatise which is a summary of all the lectures he delivered to his students. And also you have to remember the fact that this book had 26 small chapters. And the first 4 chapters and the 25th chapter are entirely devoted to poetry. That means he talks about poetry in all these chapters. That is the first 4 chapters and of course the 25th one. The 5th chapter of the book deals comedy, epic and tragedy in a general way. And the following 14 chapters exclusively he devoted to tragedy. He talked about various aspects of tragedy, the elements included in tragedy, and also he talks about the tragic hero, plot and everything which is related with this one. And the next 3 chapters he talked about poetic diction in a general way. And the next 2 to epic poetry. And the last he makes a comparison between epic poetry and tragedy. So the important factor you have to remember that the 14 chapters he entirely dedicated to tragedy. That means to talk about the various aspects of tragedy. Now we will check what was his observation on tragedy, because that is one of the most important part when we take Poetics. Because for all the competitive exams, when you look into or when you check or when you go through the question papers, you can analyze clearly that they were focusing on Aristotle's Poetics and Aristotle's observation on tragedy. So the first thing we have to focus was that what is the definition that Aristotle gave for tragedy? That's more important. So according to Aristotle, tragedy was actually an imitation of an action that is serious, complete and of a certain magnitude in language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play. So it means that tragedy always imitates some of the actions of an human being. So what all the things, what all the incidents, what all the events that happens in the life of an individual was actually imitated by the tragedians, and tragedy was being born. So tragedy was actually considered to be an imitation which imitates the life of an individual, the action of an individual, the incidents that happens in the life of an individual. And what kind of incidents? The serious ones. Yes. The tragedy was an imitation of an action that was serious. The tragedy always talks about the serious actions that happened in the life of a person or an individual. The second aspect was that it has to be complete. So whenever a tragedy was there, whenever a person imitates the life of an individual, it has to be in complete sense. That means they have to imitate the serious actions of an individual completely. And definitely it should have a certain magnitude. It should have a proper beginning, a proper middle, and a proper ending. So magnitude means the length of the incidents or the imitation or the tragedy that happens. It should not exceed. It should not be too long. It should not be too short. It has to be in the middle of a certain magnitude. And a language which is filled with all kinds of artistic devices. It should contain music. It should contain all the artistic things, dialogue, diction, and all the other things embellished or decorated with artistic devices. So what is tragedy according to Aristotle? Tragedy was an imitation of an action of an individual. And what kind of action? A serious one. And it should be complete with a certain magnitude, decorated with artistic devices. Now we will check what are the main elements of or the constituent parts of tragedy. According to Aristotle, a tragedy must have 6 constituent elements. We will check one after the other. The first and the foremost element or important element was that of plot. Plot is said to be the almost or the utmost result of all the incidents that happens in a tragedy. It is or it talks about the action, the things, the incidents that happens in the stage and everything that is related with the tragedy. So, the plot is the most important and the first constituent element of a tragedy. Second one was that of thought. What all the thoughts, what all the things, what all the ideas that goes through the character's mind was that of thought. Then definitely we should have a character. That means the characters being presented on the stage. It's not about the actors who performs the stage or who performs the action, but it is of the characters. For example, when we take the film Bro Daddy, who was the character in that film? That is the name or the character performed by Mohanlal. We never talked about Mohanlal or we never talks about Mohanlal when we talked about the character played by him. So we have to talk about the character played by Mohanlal. We are not talking about Mohanlal in general. And if we take the film Spadigam, we will always talk about Adudoma. We won't talk about Mohanlal because Adudoma was the character performed by Mohanlal. It's not the actor we are talking about. So whoever the characters on the stage, like Macbeth we have, Hamlet we have, Oedipus we have. So these are the characters on the stage. The next one was that of diction. Diction is the another most important constituent element of tragedy. Diction means what all the dialogues delivered by the characters on the stage is said to be in total as diction. Then we have action. All the actions performed on the stage. Then of course we have the music. The music makes the tragedy more attractive. It includes background music, the music, the songs and everything. Then we have of course spectacles. Spectacles was the overall incidents or the stage representations that we can see in a tragedy. And it is considered to be one of the most important things also. So, these are the main constituent elements that we can see in a tragedy. Starting with plot, character, thought, diction, music, action, and spectacles. So actually this action and plot come in close contact with each other. We don't have to mention it separately. We have 6 constituent parts when you have to write for the competitive exams. Plot, character, thought, diction, music, spectacles, and action. So these are the most important elements of a tragedy. Now when we talk about the plot, a plot always have 2 plots, or the plot can be divided into 2. That is simple plot and complex plot. Simple plot means there won't be any heights, ups, downs and anything. It will go in a parallel way. There won't be any confusing situations and there won't be any tragedies or that kind of things happens. But when we consider a complex plot contains 2 things, that is peripetia and anagnorisis. As I already said, a simpler plot won't have puzzling situations, but a complex plot will have puzzling situations and also anagnorisis and peripetia. Now we will look this much for today's session. Now this video will be having a second part soon where we are going to discuss in detail the other terms that Aristotle also coined and discussed in poetics, like Hamartia, Catharsis, tragic hero, anagnorisis, peripetia and much more. I believe this video is so much helpful for you. Thank you for watching and supporting me.